Here is supposed to be a sacred resting place of our ancestors on the island of St. Eustatius.
Welcome to the podcast Reclaiming Our Stories, Restoring Our Ties. My name is Ulysses Lopes, and you are listening to the podcast series by the St. Eustatius Afrikan Burial Ground Alliance, a grassroots organization formed as a result of the protests against the excavations on the 18th century burial ground of enslaved Africans, the Golden Rock, that were started by a team of international archaeologists in June 2021 in St. Eustatius. In this podcast, you will learn about the journey of the Alliance, its vision, and the important role that the community of Statia, the Caribbean, and the great African diaspora serve in reclaiming our narrative, history, and identity, as well as restoring our ancestral dignity and spiritual ties. All right, welcome to another podcast of the St. Eustatius Afrikan Burial Ground Alliance. My name is Ulysses Lopes. Today we will talk with Petra Ploeg, the Support Alliance staff member and scientific information specialist. So, Petra, could you tell us a bit about yourself? Where did you grow up, study, work, and how you first came to the island of St. Eustatius?
Yes, good day, Oli. Thank you. Well, I was born in Rotterdam, the Netherlands, somewhere in the 60s, so a long time ago. We moved a lot during my childhood due to the work of my father. And we ended up in the province of North Brabant, where I went to high school, and eventually I moved to Tilburg for my studies. And that's where I met Kenneth in the late 80s. At that time, I was working at the library of the Tilburg University as what they call it now, a specialist scientific information. It's a bit of a long title, but I work in the library to support researchers and students, finding literature, handling their research data, and so. And the first time I came to Statia was in 1990. That was for me a very impactful event because I already knew Kenneth for some years, but I never was in the Caribbean. It was a special experience to see a community of Black people, working, playing, relaxing, everything. While in the Netherlands, you're always a minority and there's always something going on. And of course, I had the opportunity to see what was Kenneth and what was Caribbean in him. So before that, it could be both, you have your own personal characteristics, but you also have like the Caribbean characteristics that are very different from Dutch culture, of course.
So how did you first learn about the African burial grounds and the unethical excavations?
Well, it's a bit strange, but I can't really remember how I first learned about the excavations. But what I do remember when I heard about it is that a great wave of anger came over me because of the immense disrespect that was going on. And during my whole life, I've been busy with, equal rights, human rights, and seeing the differences between the south world and the north of Europe and the rest of the world. You know about archaeologists going all over the world, going into the Egyptian pyramids and just take out the bodies who were laid there for a reason, for scientific research that seems to make it all right. So I was really upset about learning about that, even more so because it happened on an African burial ground. And you know the history that people, the individuals, but also as a people, so many things over the centuries happened to them. Then they were buried at their final resting place, what's supposed to be the final resting place. And then some archaeology for a career opportunity, they decide to excavate these persons. It's just, what do you think you have the right to do that under the nose of the communities who are the descendants of those people? So there was a great wave of anger, yeah. And still, every time it comes up and people ask, how did this happen? It comes back again.
Yeah, that's for sure. So as far as you joining the Alliance, how did that come about, and how does the work of the Alliance, like what does that work mean to you?
It started out with getting a petition online to protest against the excavations. I never would have thought that we would still be busy after 3 years working against the same injustice. So I had like supporting Kenneth for a long time. We were in the trade union activities for a long time together. I'm proud to say I was on the candidate list of Ubuntu Connected Front, who participated in the second chamber elections in 2000, I think, 21. And we got the majority of the votes in Eustatius. So there was an all black, except for me, a political party also fighting for equal rights. Their motto was equality is a human right, not a privilege. So the petition was organized by Ubuntu Connected Front, and then it continued, and the alliance was formed because many people came by the alliance, joined the alliance, I must say. So we're still here.
How has your conception of whiteness and attitudes to blackness changed over the time, over the course of your life, the work that you do since you joined the Alliance? Because, there's a whole back and forth racial thing going on, which also keeps everything divided, and it makes one be a bit more stereotypical, superior. So how has that changed over the time for you?
I think when I look back over my life, more than about the period with the Alliance, like I said, I was always involved in human rights issues. When I was in my 20s, I joined the NOVIP, which is now Oxfam, I think, and Amnesty International to try to contribute to a more equal world. But then over the years, you realize that those are also institutions that keep the power balance in place instead of making changes for the good. So when you go deeper into the things that are going on, you learn and you see that it needs to change in another way. And it needs to change in such a way that Black people or people of African descent, they need to write the narrative. They need to decide what needs to be done. So that changed my whole perspective to the inequalities in this world, but also in the sense that I lost a lot of naivety. So I was naive, I think, in the beginning. And over the years, you learn that it's huge, it's big, it's complex. It's an ongoing battle that won't be resolved in my lifetime. And that is something that's difficult sometimes, that you think, okay, you try your best, but it's so huge. You won't change it in your lifetime, and you have to accept that. You have only so much time in one day and in 1 week and in one lifetime. But still, you do what you have to do and connect and help wherever possible and wherever needed.
Have you seen any major changes over the years in your experience dealing with that?
Maybe I'm fooling myself, but I intended to say yes, because lately in the news, you see, for instance, that artifacts are being returned to the country of origin. You hear a louder voice from the African or African diaspora communities. We want reparations. I think I hear more people saying, you can say you're sorry, you can apologize, but more needs to happen. And I see a little bit more connection. I'm not sure if that's true, of course, between the continent and the diaspora communities. That gives me hope that things will evolve maybe faster in a good way.
So, with your experience and in the work with the Alliance, how can people of European descent or descendants of enslavers navigate their role then in decolonization?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Well, for me, because you also see a lot of European descendants now interested in the struggle, but they have a tendency to take over and still make it their narrative, with all the attention for the remembrance year of slavery. We did a project, Remember Station, tracing our origin. Then sometimes you see a person who has somewhere down his family tree one person of African descent, and he puts all his time and effort in it, publishes a book, and that book attracts more attention than what the Black communities are doing, because that white privilege is still so present. So I would say listen, observe, learn, confront as much as possible your colleagues, family, friends, strangers. Whenever something happens, confront them. Not maybe in the sense you will change their mind, because racist people will always, I think, be racist, but at least they'll be confronted and they know it's that they're stopped somewhere. Even if they do the same thing the next day, at one point they're being stopped. Also confront the institution you're part of, like at work, for instance, maybe the supermarket, you see something happen. Maybe you focus people who are willing to contribute. My idea of my opinion is to follow, try not to lead, try to see where you make yourself or your expertise the most valuable, because it never ends. So it needs a lot of energy. So if you put in the energy where you feel comfortable, make yourself useful, so, because it's a long and never-ending story, I would say, but that is a bit negative. And for me, for instance, that is the library field. It's also the access to knowledge. It's also a basic human right. Access to your own resources, access to educational system. So try to build your own educational systems instead of being in the Eurocentric ones, where you then first have to unlearn the Eurocentric and then learn your own heritage. That is also something that maybe I cannot contribute to, but maybe also in a supportive role. And sometimes I must say, we had that experience many, many times when Kenneth, of one of the Alliance members, will say it has a certain effect, but with certain people, of white Dutch people or other white people, when I say it, then it's, oh, that's that's unexpected. Oh, let me think about it. It's also important. It's not, fighting racism shouldn't be done only by Black people, because it concerns the whole society, the whole community, the whole world. So everybody has to do its part.
Well, could you share your feelings then on the term woke?
Oh my
Because,
goodness.
for example, woke has a whole meaning that stirred up in the past few years, with a lot of knowledge coming back about our heritage and stuff. To me, woke, the way it's been termed, has been a meaning as far as us learning about the hidden things that has been done to us, the heritage that has been stolen, and everything, and just overall our people as a nation learning about who we are and being conscious of these things as well. So that is what I would call woke. So seeing in your work with the Alliance, how do these feelings relate to the work that is being carried out by you and the Alliance as well?
Well, to be quite frank, the term woke really pisses me off, because it's one time, I think one national newspaper did an article on the Alliance and the excavations. And of course, in the heading, the term woke was mentioned. And then I think Kenneth was mentioned in the article. And then I think you have a Black man from Caribbean man working his entire life fighting injustice, fighting racism. He didn't wake up yesterday to find out that something is wrong in this world. And then you call him woke, like It's some new hobby that people are keeping themselves busy with. But I also think it's very dangerous terminology because it's the opposite of a euphemism. And I think it must be invented by extreme right or far right or populist right to diminish the importance of the fight against racism, just to be able to say, oh, it's woke, ignore it. It's nothing. It's not, it's unimportant. It's just woke. It's a bunch of crazy people. While it's the whole history of the civil rights movement, of the fight against apartheid, of anything. So it's dangerous. That type of terminology, I find it really dangerous. And it's harming the struggle.
Yeah, I myself don't really use it. I know the agenda behind it. I see how people have used it with us and against us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, like you said before, to create their own narrative.
Yes,
It's the same
exactly.
thing like the Black Lives Matter, you give the people a voice, but it's still your narrative of how that voice should be used. So I understand what you mean.
Yeah. And also then it becomes very easy when you say Black Lives Matter. Yeah, but all lives matter,
Exactly.
But it's the common response. But still, it's dangerous and we have to be careful to counter whenever it's used or when some people are using it. Yeah.
Yeah. All in all, is a controlled narrative on both ends. So,
yeah,
it makes sense. So, how have you been then confronted by your privilege in your professional or slash personal life? How have you navigated these fields consciously?
Yes, all the time, actually. The terminology, white privilege, I think that terminology I didn't know of around the time I first met Kenneth in the 90s. But over the years, you see things. And when you analyze it, you start to see more and more. And then you try to seek the truth. And that's a bit vague, I realize. But I wasn't that naive in the beginning because my sister was married to someone from Algeria who lived in the Netherlands. So I knew about getting stopped by the police because your taillight was broken and things like that. But the depth of your white privilege, you can only see it by engaging with Black people, for instance, traveling with Black people or trying to get into an hotel when you're traveling through France. Of course, Kenneth and I, because we, one Black, one white, we often test the systems. And then you see when I go into a hotel, good evening, ma'am, nice to see you. Can I book a room? Yes, of course. But when Kenneth will enter, no, sir, all rooms are booked. And it's on a daily basis and in many different areas. So when you're traveling, the same thing, everybody knows about what you call it, that people are stopped by the police and dealt in a certain matter. Well, you will not. And apparently I have an appearance that people think I won't do anything bad at all. So it's quite shocking because it's not what you encounter at customs or being stopped by the police or something like that. It's also in job interviews. I see it in job interviews where I am on the committee of judging. I don't know if you say that, to see if one is fit. The changes are there as well. When somebody Black would apply for a job, Dutch wasn't so perfect. But now, when I have like 4 colleagues who don't speak Dutch at all, and they got a job, and the whole team speaks English, and they're from Europe, so they're not Dutch, but they're white. And I can write a book with examples on what that white privilege is. But what struck me is when you try to explain that to your white colleagues, your white family, they look at you with big round eyes and they say, is she crazy? She exaggerating? It can be that bad, but it is that bad and even worse because I can tell about it. I see that it happens, but I don't live it. The moment I'm alone or with white people, I'm free of it, And that is so different. And also you have to be careful because if something goes wrong in your discussion with, for instance, police, you end up in jail or something like that. And that won't happen with me so easily.
Yeah, I know how it goes, I had my fair share of it. even just walking in and out of Amsterdam Schiphol and the Marseille, just see me going to check the bus one more time because you have to check in, top up your OV inside, but the bus is on the outside. And, they see you walking with a group of your African brothers and sisters. And eventually, they think they just prejudice in that sense.
Yeah.
And think something is up. So as Ahmad should say, not even a security comes up to ask what's going on when you're just trying to top up your OV and catch the bus, So is many things like that, like you mentioned, is being confronted by that, and it lets you know where you stand when it comes to this nation, that nation. It's very clear in the Netherlands, especially when it comes to authority and higher powers. Well, with that being said, what changes would you want to see or hope to see and have these institutions and organizations that further deepen the gap between the communities of African descent and their heritage, the burial grounds, etc.?
That's also a tough question. One thing that I find important is more exposure of the double standard in everything. And it has to be done by white people as much as black people. And change in the judicial system.
Mm-hmm.
Because I noticed that in Statia, there was more than one occasion there was something going on with a white person, high ranked. Something went wrong. It was clear what happened and that he was to blame. But what happens then? There's no legal action. No, he's promoted in a higher function, but on the other island or in the Netherlands. There's no punishment. There never seems to be any punishment. But on the other hand, when black people, people of African descent do something wrong, something is not even so, but it appears so, then it's going public before it's even any proof. It's going to jail for something really small for a very long time. So exposure would be very important. More research, more into details, because sometimes there's a saying like the devil is in the details. And when I got to learn more about the history of the transatlantic slave trade, but also the history of Statia, then you see how can one person do such things. The big system, it's bad, it's wrong, but you go into the details, it makes it come more closer, I think. So there needs to be more research, more decolonization of certain disciplines, especially archaeology, because they're not there yet. They're trying to do their best with ethical codes and this and that, but the practice is still going on. In 2022, Kenneth organized a tour at the Godet plantation, the Godet burial ground, and they had a libation over there. And it was after the government decided to block off type of cliff. And then one white gentleman, he looked at it and he said, "Oh, wouldn't it be beautiful that nature would take over the whole burial ground and it would disappear?" And then I think, why would nature need to take over? Why are all your burial grounds of the Second World War, even First World War, of all important events where crime have happened, they're well kept. They have rituals there. People go to there to bring flowers. But when it concerns African burial ground, it needs to disappear in nature. What are you thinking, And something needs to change to make people more aware that it is a significant site and it needs the attention to deserve. It was by several, the UN, European Union, even the Dutch government said that these were crimes against humanity. But it needs to be more than those words. We need places, where you can go to, reflect, and then you say, well, never again.
Well, one thing is for sure is it's clear to see that one nation just doesn't stand for the rights of the other nation, and they are standing by it through any means, whether it's these institutions, the schools, any form of creating and pushing that narrative And I could understand why they want to silence the voices of the African descendants of enslaved people, because it would shed light on the things that they have done and how they got in these high positions. Because
Exactly.
if you didn't get it clean, then you would want to hide that as well. So
Exactly.
in that aspect, I understand, but regardless of everything, I do see, like my uncle Kenneth say, an uprising, of our people. We are far from the days where we couldn't read, I mean, most of us have attended the different colleges
Yeah.
abroad, universities, top-notch education and everything. So we have proven that regardless of every circumstance that they have put in front of us, that we still gonna come out and be on top of the rights for our people. So, as we continue this fight, along with the works that the Alliance is putting out, I wouldn't say I hope, I do see the changes gonna come, because like I say, we not in those days no more where you kept us. We came with another language, so it's easily to teach us English and Dutch. We have mastered those languages now. We have mastered some of the curriculums, the political battles and everything. But as long as we still have them creating that narrative, then for sure that's going to be a problem. So all in all, I would say it was a nice discussion with you,
Yes.
sharing your side of the story, getting another perspective from someone who's on the other side of the table as well, who experienced it partially, I would say, how it is, dealing with Uncle Kenneth, like you said, dealing with hotels and stuff and things like that, seeing really what our people really go through on a day-to-day basis, So I'd like to thank you for being on this podcast with us here today. And
Thank you for having me.
yes, and for the audience, look forward to the next episode. Like I said, today we had Petra Ploeg on the call, and look out for the next one. Thank you once again for joining us. My name is Ulysses Lopes, and you were listening to a podcast episode of the St. Eustatius Afrikan Burial Ground Alliance, reclaiming our stories, restoring our ties.